Well, welcome everybody. As Nick said, we're doing an interactive family service today. My name's Chris.
And I'm Nathan.
Yes, and we're going to be leading us all together through the story of Samson and how it plays out, the good, the bad, and the ugly part of Samson's story. But we want you all to be part of this. We're actually going to need people to come up and help us act this out. So as we read the Bible, as we tell the story, we have a box full of costumes and tricks up here. So we're going to need some kids, some people who want to come and help us act it out. All right, first we're going to need an angel, a mum and a dad. Who would like to help us out with that? Yes, up the back, come on down. We need two more, an angel and a mum. Come on up, yes, come on. Yep. Excellent. All right, you can be the dad. Dad will have a hat.
There we go. Hat for Dad.
Dad for a hat.
Hi, Dad.
All right, we need one more. Okay, yes, come on up.
This is Manoah, everybody.
Manoah. Right.
Angel or Mum?
I reckon Angel.
Angel, that's
Angel.
right. Here we go.
She looks angelic, doesn't
Yeah.
she?
Can you put... Here. I'm gonna put this on over the top. I'm gonna put
And
this
here
down.
we go. Rita, you can be the mum.
We
Wear
may
that
not
as
have
a
factored
scarf.
costume changes
I don't
into
know
our
how to do
timings. Here we
scarves.
go.
I'm not a
Arms
mum,
through.
so...
Oh, no, the arm holes down here.
Okay, and while these guys are getting ready, we need our first Bible reader. Finn, Meehan, come on up. All right, you guys stand back.
And
Finn's
here's
going
a
to read
halo.
the story. And actually, while we read the story, we want you guys to act it out because there will be an angel talking to you, all these sort of things. Are we ready, Finn? I'll hold the microphone and you can read.
Over here.
A certain man from Zorah was named Manoah. He was from the tribe of Dan. Manoah had a wife who wasn't able to have children. The angel of the Lord appeared to Manoah's wife. He said, "You are not able to have children, but you are going to become pregnant. You will have a baby boy. Make sure you do not drink any kind of wine. Also, make sure you don't eat anything that is unclean. You will become pregnant. You will have a son. He must not use a razor on his head. He must not cut his hair. That is because the boy will be a Nazirite. He will set apart to God from the day he is born. He will begin to save Israel from the power of the Philistines." Then the woman went to her husband. She told him, "A man of God came to me. He looks like an angel of God. His appearance was so amazing that it filled me with great wonder. I didn't tell him where he came from, and he didn't tell me his name. But he said to me, 'You will become pregnant. You will have a son. Do not drink any kind of wine. Do not eat anything that is unclean. That is because the boy will be a Nazirite. He will belong to God in a special way from the day he is born until the day he dies.'"
Excellent. Thank you, Finn. Grab a seat. Okay, stay there because this is not the end of the story. The mum and the dad were hanging out together and they were pretty freaked out by this because they had an angel of God come and tell them that they're going to have a baby. They couldn't have a baby, but suddenly they're going to have a baby. They're going to be freaked out. And they go, "We have no idea what to do with a really special baby."
Out.
Do you have any ideas? No.
Oh, no.
No idea. So they asked God to send the angel back.
Okay, Angel, you gotta come back.
He's really freaking out. They asked God to send the angel back and give us some instructions. So the angel came back.
You gotta tell him what to do again. Like this.
And now the angel came and told them what to do. Very good. Excellent. And they had special instructions on how to treat this extra special baby.
And when you think about it, this is a story we've heard before. It's a lot like when Mary and Joseph, they have an angel visit them and say they're going to have a special baby who will grow up to save God's people from God's enemies.
Yes, there are some hints of that already. Excellent. Now, what happened was they had the baby. And the baby grew up to be a man. So, thank you, Angel, Mum and Dad. Your part in the story is done, but now we need the man. And the man, thank you, give them a round of applause. Well done.
Need some help?
We need a Samson. Who wants to be a Samson? Someone bigger? Right, Ben Idem, I see you over there. Come on up. Yes. Who wants to be the Samson? And Samson grew up,
Hang on, I'm going to get him dressed
according
before
to
he
his
goes up.
special instructions, And he was quite strong.
Right.
And because
Arms
Ben
in.
doesn't have natural muscles, we need to give him some.
He's got some natural muscles.
Oh,
No,
some
no, no,
natural
that's the
muscles.
front.
Other
Here
way.
you go. Goes
No,
on your front.
that's the front. That's
Goes on
the
your
front.
like
There we
this.
go.
Here you go. Turn around. Show around your
Yeah.
six-pack. Show him your
Samson
guns.
was built.
Yeah, Samson is pretty ripped.
Yeah. We'll do the fist later.
Yeah.
But he has
There's
a jacket. And Samson grew
Jacket
up to serve God.
Doesn't
and
fit
he
over
was
his
very
muscles.
strong. Oh, really?
There you go.
He has extra
Belt.
strong muscles. Now, Samson was the guy who was supposed to protect God's people because they had lots of enemies around. The Philistines. These were enemies of God's people, surrounding God's people, and they were under threat constantly.
And that again is a bit like when Jesus turns up, you've got God's people, Israel, but instead of Philistines, they're surrounded by Roman armies, big and strong, armor, swords, spears, and they're wondering who's going to save them.
Yes, there is some hints of that as well. Excellent. Now, Samson grew up and his hair grew really long. His hair grew really long and he grew really strong.
Yeah, show us your muscles again.
Yes.
That's
Look
good.
at that. In fact,
He is.
he grew so strong. Well, let's have a story about that. We need a lion. Who wants to be a lion? Anyone? Yes, come on up. You can be a lion. Excellent. Get the lion. One day, Samson was walking along a road like this, and this vicious lion attacked him. Oh, what is a guy going to do with a lion? And they had a fight, but guess what? Samson was so strong, he beat the lion with his bare hands.
Where do you get the bare hands from?
No, there's no bears, just lions in this story. With his bare hands, and the lion
Like
was
a ripped
killed.
apart.
Sorry. Thank you, lion. Give a round of
you,
applause
lion.
to the lion.
Thank you, Lions man. I'm here all day.
So, he was super strong. Now, this Samson guy, he was supposed to lead God's people. He was being set apart, called to be the holy guy who's going to really keep God's law and be the special guy who's going to save God's people.
Again, that's just like what Jesus came to do, to be the law keeper, the one who would save us by being holy and set apart, being a new Adam. So Samson's here a bit like a new Adam ruling over God's creation. But then what happens?
Yes, except Samson wasn't like that. He actually was more like the first Adam than the new Adam, Jesus. He thought he knew better because God's people were not supposed to marry the Philistines because they were God's enemies and they were against God and against God's people. But Samson, he saw women and he desired them and he wanted them for himself. So not once but twice he married a Philistine woman. And that didn't turn out well, as we'll see. So he married these women because, like Adam and Eve, he desired and he took for himself, and it led him astray. In fact, we're going to hear a song now. Samson, just have a seat while we sing this song. We're going to hear a song
He can do the actions.
about that first Adam and another man, Abraham, who was given God's promises, but also the best man of all, Jesus. Let's sing together. Thank you, musos. Well, let's continue our story. Samson, we need you back here, but we also need some baddies. We need some Philistines. Maybe 6. All right, yes, Fergus, come on up. Who else? Yes, come on up. We need more than that. We need a whole army of Philistines. Yes, let's have all the Hendersons. And Ian.
All right,
Excellent.
swords. Swords, here we go.
Here you go. You guys are baddies. All right.
Baddies with swords.
Yeah.
Very strong, dangerous, sharp
Oh,
swords.
anyone? One more baddie. Anyone else want to be a baddie? No, he doesn't want to be a baddie. Okay,
we've got one more.
Yes, come on up. Yeah, excellent. So there were whole armies of Philistines, like we said, threatening God's people. But Samson was so strong that he would battle them, and they would battle him, and they'd come at him with swords, but he would beat them all. They would all the Philistines would drop down because Samson would be victorious as Israel's saviour.
Yeah. And vicious.
He was very vicious. All right, Philistines, just hang around there on the side of the stage. We're going to need you later. All right, come
Good
on
job,
over, Samson. Now, like we said before, he had these marriages that didn't go so well. In fact, one time when he was going to have his marriage, he was traveling there, the Philistines came to beat him up again. And they came to attack Samson. And there was another battle.
Yeah.
But guess what? Samson was too strong.
He bashed them.
He bashed them. He was vicious. Because Samson was vicious like they were vicious. They were mean to him, so he was going to be mean to them.
But
He just wanted to treat them the same way that they treated him.
yeah, but then there were the foxes, Chris.
Oh, the foxes. Here's another story.
He was a bit clever too.
He was clever like a fox. We need 2 foxes. Who wants to be a fox? Yes, mate. Anyone? Yes, come on down. Come and be a fox. Now, because these Philistines were really antagonistic, they didn't really like Samson, they were nasty to him, he thought, I'm going to get them back. And so what he did is he found, well, not 2 foxes, but 300 foxes.
What do foxes say?
I don't know. What do they say? Okay, come on over, foxes. Come on over. And what happened was Samson got these foxes and he tied their tails together.
Yeah, you can tie their tails together.
Tie their tails together.
With a torch.
And he put a burning torch on their tails. Now, we don't have a burning torch. We don't want that. That's a bit dangerous. So we do have a torch.
Yeah.
Give it to one of the foxes to hold, I think. That's all right. And he set the foxes in a field like this, the Philistines' farms and their fields, and the foxes ran around.
Run.
Run around, foxes.
Run like foxes.
Tied together with your torch.
Yep.
Wave your
They're
torch.
tied together. Use your imaginations. Run.
Run around and run back. And guess what? This is what happened to all the Philistine farms. He was paying back the Philistines for what they did. It was all about revenge. It was all about being vicious. Thank you, foxes. Round of applause for the foxes.
Yeah, so he said he was just going to be vicious to the Philistines because they were vicious to him and he was treating them the way they treated him, which when you think about it is not like Jesus. Because Jesus says you should love your enemies and instead of treating them the way they treat you, you should treat them the way you want them to treat you.
Yes.
So there's a difference.
Yes, we're starting to see how Samson is not like Jesus. Now, Samson was also a bit foolish. He might have been clever, but he was foolish because he didn't learn his lessons with these Philistine wives because there was another lady who came into the scene and she was a Philistine and her name was Delilah. We need a Delilah. Who wants to be Delilah?
No one wants to be Delilah.
Oh, yes. Come on down. Yep, come on. We have Delilah, and Delilah was very beautiful. Excellent casting here.
With a very beautiful dress.
Yes.
And a very beautiful necklace. All right.
Okay, Delilah needs to get dressed up.
Have you got some story to tell while I do this, Chris?
Yes, so
Keep it
Delilah,
around.
well, Samson loved Delilah, and he thought she loved him. But Delilah didn't really love Samson so much. She was actually out for what she could get out of things, and even though she was beautiful, and she was still a Philistine, she was still part of God's enemies. So Delilah was over here. Come on over here, Delilah. And she went home to the Philistines. So Philistines, you need to get up. And you offer to Delilah. Come over here, Delilah. Samson, you're over here. You don't know about this yet. Oh, I don't know where your sword is. But they offered whole bags of silver to Delilah. Here you go, Delilah. Take the silver. This is for you if you betray Samson and find out what his weakness is. Because they knew they couldn't beat him, but they wanted to, and they wanted to find out his weakness. So Delilah took the silver and went home to Samson over here, and she asked Samson, not once, but 3 times, what is your weakness? What is your weakness, Samson? Well, Samson was a little bit clever.
Get the rope undone.
And he didn't...
Tie him up.
with rope that's not undone. Okay,
Yeah.
So he said things like, oh, if you tie me up with brand new ropes, I'll be totally weak and be
This
overpowered.
is a brand new rope. Never been untied before.
Or
Okay,
if you
quick,
plait
hold that.
my hair and put
Run around
cords
him.
in it, I'll be weak
Run around
and
him.
you'll be
Tie him up.
overpowered. So we're tying up Samson. So she did that. She tied up Samson one time, and Samson tied up there.
Tied up really tight.
She
Really,
sent
really
in the
tight.
Philistine army. They came to get Samson. But guess what? He was still strong, and he burst out of his ropes, and he beat them all up again. And they... All right. Okay. Calm down, Samson. Calm down.
That's why we picked his brother.
So Samson was strong again. But guess what? Samson was still foolish, and he didn't learn his lesson again, because Delilah begged Samson to tell him again. So she got down on her knees and begged and nagged. So down on your knees, beg Samson, ask him to tell you the weakness. Well, after 3 times you'd think he'd learn, but he didn't. This time Samson told him his true weakness, which was his hair. So if his hair was cut, he would be weak like a normal man, and that would be the end of him. So Samson fell asleep one day. Down the front, Samson, come and fall asleep. And Delilah came, and while he was sleeping, snip, 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 there goes his hair.
Sit up for a second, Samson. Sit up for a second. Sit up, quick.
Ow.
Sorry, now you're bald. You can put it on.
That's short enough, I think. Anyway, so she cut his hair, and then she called in the Philistines again, and this time Samson could not resist. He was weak like a normal man, and they beat him up.
Yeah.
And they carried him off. They didn't kill him. They carried him off. Back here to jail. Up the back. Philistine jail. Watch out for that temple. Okay. And there's Samson. All right, Philistines, just retreat over there for now. We'll need you a bit later.
So
Samson is in jail. He's beaten. He's carried off.
And they were mocking him and stuff.
Yeah, we're getting to that. Yeah, they're mocking him.
But when you think about it, this is again, it's just like Jesus. He was betrayed by someone who said that he loved him, even kissed him, Judas. Betrayed for silver coins and arrested by these strong soldiers, the enemies of God's people, and taken into prison.
Yes. We're seeing more hints of Jesus in Samson's story here. All right, Delilah, I think we're done with you. Thank you for your part in this story. A round of applause for Delilah. Excellent. And we are left with Samson sitting in jail, sitting and wondering where it all went wrong. Because they didn't just carry him off to jail, they actually poked his eyes out as well. And it wasn't a pretty story. Here he was, beaten, defeated, wondering where it all went wrong in this jail, and praying to God. And maybe he even sang a song. Are you ready to sing us a song, Ben? No, okay. Well, let's get another Samson. All right, Reuben over here, you could be a Samson for us.
Should we dress him up?
No, I don't think so. You want? It's hard to play guitar with a fist. And while we sit here, let's hear Samson's song.
Okay, all right. He's a team player, Reuben.
Hey there, Delilah, this is your ex-boyfriend Samson. And I know you thought that lifting weights made me so buff and handsome. You were wrong. It's 'cause I let my hair grow long that makes me strong. Hey there, Delilah, you came in while I was sleeping, and I couldn't hear you coming, and I didn't feel you cutting. You left my hair piled on the floor while I just snored. Oh, what you did to me, oh, while I was asleep. Oh, I'm a Nazarene, oh, but you shaved me clean. Delilah, you're so mean. I slaughtered many Philistines with a donkey's jawbone, and that's no lie. But now I'm chained up to the wall, and I can't cry no tears at all, because they came and gouged out both my eyes. Why'd you grab your clipping shears and shave my head like Britney Spears? And now I'm standing here in total shame, and you're to blame. Hey there, Delilah, why did you have to deceive me? It's hard for me to think that long ago I wanted you to be my bride. But you took too much off the sides. Hey, Delilah, when you die, just tell the devil I said hi, and he'll know why. Oh, it's what you did to me, Oh, now I'm up a creek. Oh, now I feel so weak. Oh, I look like a freak. Oh, Delilah, you're a geek.
Thank you, Samson, too.
Thanks, mate.
So it wasn't looking good for Samson, and he had failed utterly at being what he was supposed to be, God's representative to the world and protecting God's chosen people. And he sat there and he rotted in jail for a while, but he actually sat in jail for a while, long enough that his hair started to grow back. Still didn't have his eyes, and he was still in jail. The Philistines were still lording over him. In fact, the Philistines, they thought they had won. They were having parties. And in fact, they came over here to the temple and they had a party in the temple. They're going, yeah, we are the victors. And our God, this is a temple to the god Dagon, if we remember 1 Samuel, the statue that fell down, face down, that guy. So they're in their temple having a party, and Samson was rotting in jail. And they called him, they said, let's get him over here so we can poke fun at him even more. So they went and got Samson, dragged him, careful of that temple. We don't want it to go down too. All right, just stand up, Samson. Stand up. Okay. And they were poking fun and mocking Samson and going, we beat you. Our God's better than your God. And he just stood there. He just stood there.
That's also what the soldiers did to Jesus before they crucified him. They beat him, they mocked him,
yes,
poked fun at him.
Yes, and keep poking him. Yes, they kept poking him. And Samson, well, stand aside, Philistines. Samson was just receiving it at this stage. But he prayed to God, let me have revenge on my enemies just one more time. Give me strength. Let me die with the Philistines. So he asked them to put him under the temple. And so he got into the temple and he said, put one hand on one column, one hand on the other. And the other Philistines, they were all partying and mocking and all that sort of stuff. And he said, God, give me strength. Let me die with the Philistines. And he pushed with all his might. And all the Philistines died. All their leaders.
Samson died too.
Samson died. Sorry.
Yeah.
And there was death and destruction. And in fact, Samson killed more people in his death than he did in his life. It's a sad story, one that ends in death. But actually now all the leaders of the Philistines were dead and God's people were safe, at least for a little while.
They were. I reckon we can send our Philistines and our Samson.
Thank you. Give a round of applause to all our actors today. Thank you, everybody.
Swords and Samson.
Thank you. Well done. All right.
All right. So there's lots of the Samson story where we notice little bits that are like Jesus' story, especially as he got towards the end where he was arrested and mocked, humiliated by God's enemies. But there was that difference in terms of how Samson treats his enemies and how we're going to see that Jesus does. I'm going to invite Emily up to read a little bit of the story of Jesus from Luke's Gospel.
People do these things when trees are green. So what will happen when trees are dry? 2 other men were also led out with Jesus to be killed. Both of them had broken the law. The soldiers brought them to the place called the Skull. There they nailed Jesus to the cross. He hung between the 2 criminals. One was on his right and one was on his left. Jesus said, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they are doing. The soldiers divided up his clothes by casting lots.
Great.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you. So what do you think when we hear a story like this one from Samson? I've got some questions, particularly, I guess, for the kids. When you hear this story or when you see this story unfolding, who do you think we're meant to relate to in the story? The story of Samson. Who do you think we should be? Anyone brave enough to answer? Anyone? Don't leave me hanging. There's not that many characters. Do you think we're meant to be Delilah? No. What about Samson, the hero? You think we're meant to be Samson? Show of hands? No. See, I think often we do think we're meant to be Samson. We think we're meant to be like this Nazarite, this figure who's set apart from birth to be God's chosen representative, this holy person. And it'd be great if we could be holy. It would have been great if Samson could have been. But then if that's us, how are we meant to treat the baddies in the story, the Philistines? Are we meant to pick up donkeys' jawbones and tie together foxes and bash them viciously? See, these Philistines who worship in these temples that are set up in opposition to God, are we meant to take matters into our own hands and bash them, do the Samson thing, the vicious attack? See, we sometimes think when we hear a story like this that we're meant to be like the hero, like Samson, like the deliverer. But here's the catch, because actually, when you think about it, we Australians, we're not Jewish. So in the Old Testament, we're not God's people. We're not Samson. We're actually more like the Philistines. We're more like God's enemies without a hero stepping into the story. And while we might not have temples that are big and made of stone and to obviously foreign gods, this temple that Samson was in, it was to Dagon, if you were here when we did 1 Samuel, Dagon was the statue that toppled over when God's presence was brought into the temple. It's an enemy of God, this temple. We might not have temples like that, but we do have these places we go that have big pillars where we go to worship, where we go, it's like we're going to a temple doing religious stuff, or sometimes we all dress the same. We want to humiliate our enemies in other temples with big pillars. See, we are quite religious, we Australians, and we're not often following God. So maybe we're not Samson in this story. Maybe we're God's enemies. And maybe that's bad news, because maybe Samson is actually giving God's enemies what they deserve. Now, Samson's not a clean skin. He does the wrong thing too. He does just what Adam does. But what Adam did, turning his back on God to worship something else, to pursue his own picture of what good life looks like, well, that's what we all do. It's what the Philistines do. It's what we then build temples for, like shopping centres and football stadiums. All sorts of things we do. And Samson came to do what God does to those sorts of temples and to those sorts of people, to knock them down, to destroy false religion, to bring death and judgment on people who reject God. And that's bad news for us if that's what we do, isn't it? That what we do when we reject God, it earns judgment. Samson is doing what is deserved, bringing judgment. He's a judge. That's why the book's called Judges. If you've been with us while we were working through Luke's gospel, we saw that Jesus was coming as a judge to Jerusalem too. He was coming to judge another temple that wasn't worshipping God the right way, that was keeping people out, that was doing all sorts of wrong things. And so we saw, if you were here in Luke's gospel, Jesus say their house, the temple, is going to be destroyed, is left for them desolate. He's talking about this temple. He's talking about coming to Jerusalem a bit like Samson did, to destroy God's enemies, to judge a temple. And when you think about it, those similarities between Samson, who is a judge who spreads his arms out wide, and in doing that brings judgment on a temple and destroys God's enemies. Well, who else has a posture like that? In the story that Emily just read for us about Jesus, where he's crucified, that means his arms are put out like this. We're told there are people on his right and left. His arms are stretched out wide, just like Samson. But where Samson dies, his arms stretched out wide to bring judgment on God's enemies, Jesus dies, arms stretched out wide on the cross, and he models a different way of doing things. See, Samson had that vicious cycle of treating God's enemies the way they treated him. When Jesus is on this cross being mistreated and mocked, everything that happened to Samson, he doesn't get up and kill people with a donkey's jawbone, though he was still strong enough to do that. He says, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing. And he dies having said that about the people who are there, showing what he's come to do in his judgment to bring mercy and forgiveness. But he does, as he dies, destroy a temple. He is God's temple in a way, and he is being destroyed, but also that curtain in the temple that separated God from his people, God from the world, is torn. so that suddenly through Jesus we have access to God again. We can worship him again, and he even offers to come and live in us, to make us his people, to make us set apart, even better than Samson was. And we can even get haircuts. That's how good it is. But he does that by coming back from the dead, being raised to life, so that we can worship God again, not be God's enemies, but be made God's friends, his family, his people. See, this is how Jesus is different to Samson. Samson dies and takes down thousands of God's enemies. Jesus dies destroying a temple and making so many people God's friends and family. So when we read the story of Samson, it's not complete unless we go to the story of Jesus. We're not meant to want to be like Samson. We're not meant to ask, what's our donkey's jawbone that we're going to use to destroy God's enemies? What's our line that we've got to rip apart? We're meant to see how Samson points forward to Jesus, and then to leave our temples behind, the temples where we worship things other than God, whether it's religious temples or shopping centres, and find God as we see him on the cross in Jesus. So here's where Jesus dies to make his enemies his friends, to bring outsiders into the kingdom. Next week, if you join with us, we're going to hear another story from the Old Testament of an outsider, of Ruth, who was part of a people who weren't God's people and was brought into God's family. But for now, we're going to sing, because while Samson might have rocked the world when those big rocks came falling down, when Jesus came and judged the temple that he was judging in Jerusalem, it rocked the world in an even bigger way. So we're going to sing Jesus Rocks the World together now.